Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 3 of Themed Environments 101, a series that explores themed environment history, design practices, and integration. I'm your host, Christopher Centenary, and if you'd like to support this channel, please subscribe and give this video a like. Also, linked below is our Patreon, where you will have early access to new videos, a say in future videos, merchandise, and more. In our last video, we explored the origins of themed environments and the social movements that helped form them. Today, we will be exploring a place of food, restaurants, and dining among the tools and drivers of themed environments. Enjoy the video. Food is many things. It is sustenance and drives much of our evolutionary story. It is arguably also one of the primary components to our experiences with others within the built environment. As a basic need, it naturally has a high place in culture and society. It is one of the few daily needs that engages all 5 senses. As such, experiences that revolve around food etch themselves deeply within both our individual and collective memories. Think in your own life about the food-based experiences that have shaped your views and relationships with food, others, and the environment around us. Memories of your grandmother's kitchen, your dad making Saturday breakfast, cooking a meal in college with friends and roommates, or sharing that first meal with a significant other on a date. In many ways, food is a time machine, allowing us to recall memories through the act of cooking and consuming. At home in private, these experiences and memories are made and shared with our own tribe, but in public at a restaurant can become shared experiences that engender social interactions both within and outside of our circle. Before the advent of climate-controlled supply chains, options for food were limited by region as to what could be produced in a given area. For thousands of years, people from various regions ate what was locally available as a cultivated crop or hunted game. It isn't until around 1100 AD in China when the first recorded knowledge of a modern style of restaurant appears. In bustling cities with densely packed urban populations, Chinese tradesmen traveling outside of their home were not accustomed to the strange local foods. These early restaurants were located in lively entertainment districts, similar to the retail, dining, and entertainment establishments we build today. Think of a Disney Springs, City Walk, and the like. Jumping ahead to the early 1500s in Japan, regional restaurants were born out of the Japanese tea house tradition. In some of these restaurants, multi-course tasting menus were crafted to tell the story of particular places and seasons. Interestingly, despite centuries of trade between both the Eastern and Western world, there is little evidence that these restaurants of the East influenced the later developed European restaurants in the West. In the West, restaurant culture evolved out of early French restaurants that started before the French Revolution in the late 1700s. They opened originally as health food shops selling bouillon, and slowly evolved into what eventually became the Grand Parisian restaurant. They would serve as the archetype for the fine dining restaurant of the next 100 years, and eventually what we know today. The restaurant represents a blending of our innate need for food combined with our desire for social interaction around a table. Recently, I had the pleasure of dining at one of the world's best restaurants, Thomas Keller's The French Laundry in Napa Valley, California. Now stay with me here because by this point you may be thinking to yourself, what does this have to do with themed environments? But this is where it gets interesting, because as I sat there in the courtyard of the French Laundry, I began to think about the narrative placemaking of my surroundings. The building itself, an old turn-of-the-century steam laundry, and the food, sourced locally, much of it grown from the very soil beneath my feet. The narrative was the place itself, and the story told interpretively through the manipulation of ingredients by the chefs. There is no immersive IP, but we are immersed in a story of place and time. Little touches like the clothespins on the napkin and the laundry tag style check tells you that the story you are living is one of the place itself. This was truly one of the few moments in life where time stood still. The placemaking here is both subtle and omnipresent. On a warm September afternoon, it is what I'd imagine Eden to be like. The food itself is by no means incredibly exotic, but is presented in such a way that it is transcendent, a line of code that as soon as it hits the tongue brings back a rush of memories to childhood, or at least a simpler time. The cornets and Ritz cracker are at the same time unique and familiar. Oysters and pearls represents the components of a warm bowl of mac and cheese on a cool fall day. After all, isn't that what themed environments are supposed to do anyway? Engender social interactions while recalling fond memories and writing new ones. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, themed dining was all the rage. The Rainforest Cafe, Mars 2112, Planet Hollywood, and Bubba Gump all blossomed into existence. There was even a nautical-themed restaurant owned by Steven Spielberg and Jeffrey Katzenberg called Dive that opened in 1994. In this submarine-shaped building, the restaurant would dive every 45 minutes with a bubble effect on the porthole windows and audio effects throughout the dining area. It's worth noting that themed dining goes back much further than the 1990s. In the US, the first themed dining establishments popped up during the Depression of the 1930s as tiki bars. More specifically, the first tiki bar, Don the Beachcomber, opened in 1933 in Los Angeles. Like many of the experience of the time, tiki bars sold escapism. The kitschy, nautical, and sometimes culturally insensitive nature of the environment, more than anything, was a relatively inexpensive way to escape the realities of living in the Depression-era US. After World War II, the tiki bar concept exploded into popularity, along with other themed restaurant concepts. Themed dining served as a way to escape without the expensive price tag of taking an exotic trip. It is also evident that during this post-war boom, the trend supporting themed dining also allowed for the creation of other themed entertainment experiences, specifically Disneyland in 1955. But while Disneyland would slowly become successful, tiki bars and the associated themed dining establishments slowly fell out of favor, until the 1990s, when we again saw an increase in demand for the concept. Again, the themed restaurants of the 90s were selling escapism to a hungry public that was willing to pay handsomely for the ability to escape the real world, even for just a few hours. Many of these restaurants were met with early success and fanfare that over time started to wane. The problem for most of these spaces was not in the theming itself, but rather the lack of evolution to the narrative. What may have been fun and exciting once or twice was less enticing by the fifth or sixth go-round. For lack of a better term, the theming was utilized as a gimmick rather than an evolving narrative driver of the experience. Being told the same story over and over, combined with somewhat mediocre food and a high price tag, spelled the end for most of these themed dining experiences of the 90s. While some still exist, they are a shadow of their former selves, and show little to no signs of turning around anytime soon. With that being said, theming and narrative elements built into food-based experiences can certainly be successful. The Boathouse at Disney Springs, Toothsome Chocolate Emporium, Oga's Cantina, and the Edison all prove this point. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this concept, and if you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. Also, check out our companion podcast, where we share some unscripted thoughts on the many subjects of themed environments. I'll see you next time.